Good evening. So this revised. This is a brownfield reimbursement agreement from 2022.
Anything about why looked at the provisions, they look pretty benign,
They do.
but as to why, or Haley or her.
They moved you over.
Hello.
This is my preferred spot. I had this spot for 4 years. The 4 years before that, I was next to Helen. I can hear being way down there. It's like, eh? I moved Nora Jackson over, so that's right. So the only question we have, Ms. Jackson.
That big old resolution.
No, is the over under 60 minutes?
What's the top rate?
Probably the 5th meeting.
It was from the, oh, yeah.
We've been here in 20. Remember a council meeting under
There's no. Nope.
there's a public hearing though.
Here.
Is Joe speaking?
You're not some planning commission meetings go less than 5 for sure, so you guys really trying to set up.
Well, we've got this public hearing for obsolete property rehabilitation with re-up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm just wondering I wonder if Sam Shaheen's gonna fill up or and all those guys.
It's not the information that came for you guys back in September.
Right.
Just hold it. They need to just figure something out before. Okay. So.
Well, we did this 12 years ago, so. But they don't.
Then that other last thing they put on here.
They pulled the
26
phase 2 on 117 and 119.
Yes.
So they know about the mercury.
Yes. They do. Rewinding in my head a little bit, but yeah.
Because I was in charge of that project when we pulled that phase 2.
By this time,
Are you guys ready?
Oh, we are. Sorry.
All right, let's go. All right. We'd like to call this study, I would like to call the study session in order at 6:30.
You should get.
All right. Call this meeting in order, like I said, at 6:30, pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call.
Councilmember Williams. Reed. Lawler. Davis.
Here.
French.
Here.
And Mayor Pro Tem Jackson.
Here. Items for individual discussion. We start with discussion over the approval resolution of 2023-04, resolution to approve the obsolete property rehabilitation exempt certificate for Albion Reinvestment Corporation.
Well, good evening, Mayor Pro Tem and Council. Yes, so as you might have heard from the city manager, this is minus dates changed to reflect the current year, identical to the Oprah resolution that we asked you to approve last year. The reason it's back before you tonight is because the property owners are working on this rehabilitation, delayed the start year of their project from 2022 to 2023 is when they are trying to formally start the project. This you all know that with these projects, there are a lot of different conditional funding agreements. We are one part of it, and last year they rescinded this application before the state tax commission issued any kind of ruling on it. So that application, no action was taken. It was pulled. The other one, since we're talking about it, the other Oprah exemption certificate was approved that last year for our Erie Street apartments over there. So one was good. We pulled one, starting it over this year. And I believe at the end of this month, the big Albion plan will be, is this okay information to share the MSF
Yes.
board?
Yes, so it'll be going for the MSF board, the Michigan Strategic Fund, for formal approval of the funding. So then that kind of gets the green light and they're ready to go. So
Ours is the last piece on that. Later in the game, I know then the applicants were comfortable with, but still certainly in terms of getting this exemption approved this year, we've got the whole rest of the year. So they're right on our timelines. They've applied exactly the same way they did previously when we sent it to the tax commission. So all we're asking is for you to approve that again this evening.
And
Any questions?
I read that there is expected completion date 2024.
Yes. Yeah, that is, when I read that, I thought it was aggressive too, but I trust that they've done some more construction than I have, and from the looks of things, I mean, how much behind the scenes work can there be? There's only been 8 years of it so far. I'd like to think that they're ready to pull the trigger and get some construction done pretty quickly. Yeah, no, I verified that. The board chair verified that a couple times, as well as a couple other people between me and him. So we're confident that that's what they meant to put.
That's good. I mean, it can happen.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Good.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
All right, moving on to the next discussion item. First reading ordinance 2023-20. An ordinance to amend chapter 2, administration by amending article 4, finance division 2, purchases that section 2-384, purchases and bids general. Any questions? It is a discussion of.
Colin, you want to speak to why the changes were made?
Yeah, so if council recalls, I think it was our last meeting, we briefly discussed how the current purchase threshold for the city manager was $5,000 for having to do bids, and that ordinance was last done in the 90s, which is different in $5,000 30 years ago versus now is significantly different. So we upped it to $15,000. We kept the provision that requires the city manager has to notify council of any purchase that's in excess of $1,000. So council will still have to get that information. So basically, the city manager has the authority to make purchases of budgeted items that are $15,000 or less. We'll still get council notice. If it's a non-budgeted item, we kept the threshold, the threshold is $5,000. We also built in a provision. A problem that's been coming up is sometimes the city manager will put out an RFP and will not get any responses. And the way that the current ordinance is drafted is it doesn't contemplate that scenario. It says, well, if you're over $5,000, you need to do a bid. But what happens if you don't get a response to the bid? So what I did is I built in a provision that says, in the event they do a bid and they don't get responses, then the city manager can go out and solicit proposals, but she has to solicit not less than 3, and then make a recommendation to council for approval. Which is basically what the practice has been when we don't get responses to those bids. But it's just memorializes it in advance. And then the other thing that we added was when the city manager brings a contract before council for approval and the council votes to approve it, We built in a provision that says, once council has approved a contract, the city manager does not then have to come back and say, approve these payments under the contract that you've already approved. Because that's redundant to get permission to distribute money that the council's already approved the city manager to spend. So that's basically it in a nutshell.
Can you give us an example of what has taken place in the past? Like a, for instance, or, you know, just a relative example of, okay, well, the city manager would have to do this, and this before. Now this streamlines that entire process.
Well, yeah, so by way of example, I mean, when we talk about the purchasing threshold of $5,000, there's very few capital expenditures that can be made in the city that don't cost more than $5,000. I know we've all seen the equipment that has to be authorized for public services. There'll be, you know, something that goes out at the water treatment plant. And, you know, if it's cost $5,500, instead of, you know, the city manager being able to say, hey, you know, Director O'Brien, go ahead and fix that. She's got to bring it to council and it takes time. So that's one that we see quite often. The bidding issue where we get no responses comes up quite often.
But like the contract, so say we're doing the Haven Street or the Haven Road project, every time an expenditure has to be made, she doesn't in turn have to come back.
Right, once the contract will still come before council and council will still have to approve the contract, but once that contract comes forward, unless there's an amendment to the contract, basically the city manager can make expenditures under the contract without having to come back and say, can I please spend the money under this contract that you guys have already approved?
Got it. Thank you.
Any other questions? Go.
Yeah, I just have one question regarding repealer clause.
Yeah,
So part of the ordinance is in conflict, but you can, explain that.
so I put at the end of every ordinance, what's called a repealer clause, and it's basically just a fail-safe that if there's another ordinance in another section that somehow conflicts with the new ordinance that you've just adopted, this eliminates the conflicting provision.
Okay.
That I put that in every ordinance.
Supersedes everything.
I see.
That way, if you come across some old ordinance and we have a lot of ordinances that somehow has some language that might raise a question, you'll see that the newer ordinance.
Supersedes.
Yep,
That's
exactly.
My only question was that, so I know we talked about the 5,000, 10,000. So do you see that when you run into working with all these individuals is roughly over the 10,000 versus what is the, the extra 5, the 15,000?
You can answer that question.
I could probably answer that.
Go ahead.
When we were here at the last meeting, I think it was Councilman French that, I don't know what you looked at, but the 5,000 from 1990s translated to 12,000, I think 500-ish. And so rather than land on kind of that odd number, I thought 15,000 would be the next run. Well, instead of going down, I figured it'd go up. So I landed on 15,000 as opposed to 12,500.
Okay, all right, because I know I just heard the word 10,000, that's why I was asking, so did we go back and look at something and think, well, maybe we should go up to 15,000 versus staying at 10,000, that's the question, because I heard those words.
Yeah. The number that I quoted was a dollar equivalent from 1994, 7, whatever it was, and it worked out to be, as I recall, $14,001.
Oh,
14,000. Yes, what I'm saying, because I'm hearing different numbers, so that's why I'm asking.
So, so
It's very rare for something to exceed the 15,000, but it is possible. I know that we've had some repairs that either the water or sewer department, they've had to make that have come in higher than that, but generally it just gets getting with the times.
Okay, all right. Any other questions? Okay. Moving on to another discussion on approval materials management agreement with Michigan Agribusiness Solutions.
Can you give an overview?
Yes.
Yeah, so this, we currently have a service agreement with this company. They haul off sludge or sledge, however you want to say it, from the wastewater treatment plant. The current agreement is set to expire by the end of the month. So Director O'Brien, he did solicit 3 bids or proposals for this service. We are recommending to renew our management contract with the same company for a 3-year term. They are the second lowest. And we're making this recommendation simply off of there are testing fees, and they have a flat fee of $1,000 for any testing, where the lowest bid, it ranged in prices. So we could be paying more than what we would if we went with this company, as well as we also have a good working relationships and everything providing us with that service. So that is why we felt comfortable making that recommendation to renew that contract for us.
Any other questions on? Okay, so moving on to approval, discussion of the approval of $100,000 expenditure request for the fire truck purchase. I know the man is in the house. Oh, okay, there you go.
So I laid a lot of this out in the letter that I sent you. Is there anything specific? I don't know how much time we have to discuss this that you have questions on, or would you just want me to explain?
Yeah.
I got to reading through all of this and I said, my.
Oh, I'm the same way. So when we bought the tower truck 10 years ago, we basically wrote that entire thing that you're reading there.
Wow.
And the reality is that the majority of what's in there, it's the same on every single truck. It's not something that's going to be different. There's just a few little things that are different. The main things that we look for in the trucks are at least a 1,250 gallon per minute pump and at least a 750 gallon tank. This truck has a 1,500 gallon per minute truck and a 1,000 gallon tank. So it's above what we look for in the truck. We don't want to go too big because then the truck gets too big and you can't, the size wise, it's an issue. So, but this truck was exactly what we were looking for. It just happened they have already ordered this truck. It was going to be a demo for them, but they're offering it to us for the price that they're basically paying for it. It was bid through a company called Sourcewell, which is very similar to what MIDeal is. I don't know if everybody knows MIDeal that we use here. So it's a federal version of MIDeal. So it's been bid, so there's no requirements to do any bidding on it or anything else. It meets all the federal government standards for what we have to do to bid a truck. So.
And the biggest thing to note, this will be a 2024 expenditure, but we're
Yeah.
bringing it to you for approval so that we can get our order placed and we don't have to wait. And it's a few more years before we have a truck.
That was the question I was gonna ask.
Yeah, it'll be delivered. The expectation, their expected delivery of it on their order already would be March of 24. So the payment wouldn't be required until after the truck has been
So we
delivered.
can
So,
budget it for
yeah.
What are you going to do with the present truck?
I've had some interest in purchasing it. I don't think it's going to bring us very much money. It's completely outdated. I have to double check and see on our previous truck. We were able to sell it, but we had to guarantee it would never be used for fire purposes again. And actually, the person who does the mechanical work on our trucks now is interested in purchasing it. He's also the one that purchased our last truck because he'll part it out and use the parts to fix older trucks that he still works on. And last time the deal we made with him, it was either $4,000 or $5,000 worth of work that he did on our trucks for free.
So if you are able to sell it, that would take the 123,780 down.
Right. Unless I trade it for work on our trucks, then I didn't have
Right.
cash, but it's still saving money out of the budget for stuff that we'd be spending. So,
Okay.
David's not here, but I don't know.
Yeah, so we've talked this over. We met last week with finance director Clark, and he proposed that we will cover this out of the equipment pool fund based off of the old equipment that we auctioned off last year. There is a surplus in that. And he would recommend that we.
I think he said there was a surplus of $200,000, so the money is there from that sale of surplus property. And some of that property was military equipment that public safety had that we were able to auction off and use that money. So.
Sweet.
So you auction off that from the military?
Yeah, some of it that we
Oh,
weren't
you
using.
did?
anymore.
Oh, okay.
There's certain property that we have to return to them, not very much, but most of it, when we get it, after we've used it for a year, we have no purpose for it, we can sell it. So.
Oh, okay.
Any more questions for? Yep. All right, thank you so much. Right, move on to discussion emergency management plan. Vivian, would you like to over this, please?
Well, I wanted to bring to the council the idea of possibly establishing, if we don't have, I don't know if Albion has an emergency plant management plan that we do, maybe to make it known to us or
Yeah.
tell us what we have and what we need.
It's pretty basic, because it's generalized into any emergency that could happen in town and how things operate. The city manager appoints an emergency manager, and that emergency manager right now is, Jason Kern, the deputy chief. And it has been for as long as I've worked at public safety, generally been the deputy chief or lieutenant below the chief that is the emergency manager. So, we can get copies of the plan. I do think it's something we probably need to look at, because I don't think it's been updated probably for 10 or 15 years, but.
Yeah, I was thinking in addition to that, you know, in terms of the human factor, if there's a flood, if there's a power outage, where can people go? If, you know, they don't have food.
So
what
that's
are
set
the
up through,
resources?
yeah, that's set up through County emergency management. I know there's 3 designated shelters in town, one of them being the Dow Center, one of them being the Opportunity School, and I'm not sure, I do
High
think
school.
Washington Gardner is the 3rd one.
It is.
Yeah. And
Who knows that though?
the emergency manager, I mean, that's where that decision's made based on what's available and where things can go. It's really County Emergency Management who runs the show when it comes to emergency management. We have a designated person, but it's not on the same level as the county can. But when there's an emergency in town, the declaration of emergency, I believe, has to come from the mayor. Once the mayor declares an emergency, then it goes on to the county. The county would declare an emergency, which then goes on to the state. They declare an emergency, and then if the state declares an emergency, the federal government would declare emergency.
Mhm.
You can't get federal funds until that process has happened.
Right.
Now, that doesn't mean the state doesn't declare the emergency before we do,
Mhm.
or the county before we do, but generally it has to go in that process in order for us to get federal funding. Then the resources come for the other things that we need at that point, whether it's FEMA or the state or so forth, and bringing in the equipment and other things that we might need for an emergency.
Okay. If it's not to that level, is it all or none?
No, it's not all or nothing. It's over 10 years ago because I wasn't chief. We had the windstorm that knocked down all the trees on the south side of town, basically. And we declared an emergency in town because it was so bad, but the county and the state never declared emergency, so we never got any funding for that. But we were still able to work with emergency management with the county at the time, who came in and helped with resources and all the things that we needed to do. So there's a process that goes on even if the funding doesn't occur. It just, whose pocket does the money come from at that point? So.
So there is nothing the community can do. I mean, in terms of, okay, for instance, people who didn't have a place to go in the dark, you
Right.
know, was Opportunity School open, the gymnasium?
Well, the problem you run into in a small community like this is the Dow Center, which is one of those areas, was without power most of the time as well. And so you run into those issues where our emergency centers may not be, you know, good for that. If we had a train derailment like East Palestine,
Yeah.
none of those places would probably be a place to evacuate people to, because they're all downwind from everything on this side of town type of thing. So that's where we got to coordinate with the county, and we would coordinate and go to shelters that are outside the city. I know there was a couple people that Chris Young, who's our emergency manager for the county, placed one in Jackson, I think, at a hotel, because our hotel was full because the people in town filled it up before emergency management could get any rooms. So, but they did help us place people that were displaced because of the power outage.
I just wish some kind of communication can come from the city, you know, if there is a need or
Right.
when there's a need, and it may not be on the magnitude of the whole, you know,
Right.
of a storm, but
Yep.
if someone doesn't have a place to go.
Yep, and so I was only made aware of the one person
Mhm.
that there was an issue with. There was another person, I know that our officers helped out, and it may have been the same person down at the hotel one night, that the hotel allowed them to stay in the lobby for a while because of heat issues and so forth, but most of it is just a matter of letting us know what needs to be done, and then we can move from there with
Okay.
emergency management to get it done. In this situation, I wasn't aware of a huge need. I know people didn't have power and so on, but there's not a lot I can do about that end of it, but But when there is a true need of somebody who has nowhere else to go and no place else to turn, there are resources that we can get the Red Cross involved, we can get emergency management involved and so forth, so.
Need to hold that thought. It's 6:52.
Yeah.
And we can bring this discussion back over into the other meeting because of the fact we did not have we need that information, the approval brownfield reimbursement agreement. If we need to hit that for a couple of minutes, I think we need to do that because that's the approval item and we need to discuss that now here before we go any further. So I'd like to discuss about the brownfield reimbursement agreement. And then, I'm sorry, Donovan, but I think we should hold some more, the other comments
fine.
hold into the next
fine.
meeting, and that's a little longer, so that we can get a clear understanding before we approve. Okay, is that?
Color.
That's color or the spreadsheet, yes.
So this brownfield reimbursement agreement, it was approved by the EDC's BRA back in August of 2022. Council, you all approved it in September of 2022. The current EDC CEO, there are just some minor changes reflected into that reimbursement agreement. It went before our EDC BRA TIFA board last week for approval. They approved it, and now just as normal procedure, it comes before the city council to approve. I don't believe there was anything major that was changed in the original document. You have been provided with both copies. The outline version just shows those updates, and you also have like the clean final version. Virginia, if I missed anything, please feel free.
Any questions on this? You need a few minutes to.
Was it just getting us back in line with the state ordinance, or was that the reason for the changes?
When I look through it, it looks like just minor language change.
Yeah.
I think it was just a cleanup of the document.
Okay.
I see in D, there was some changes there. On that second line, that was crossed out. Okay.
I asked them, hey, by the way, you know, we have this done again because it didn't assign the first time. But if you want to sign it, when you look at it, Nelson said he would. He made some grammar recommendations, things to clear things up. And then it went to the developer approved because they'll be the one signing, so.
Then if you look
Okay.
over there on the amendment, you see that part.
Yeah, I got you.
That over, okay.
So, yeah, so this is at the recommendation of the EDC's attorney? Thank you.
All right. All right. So, meeting adjourned at 6:50. I'm sorry.
Public comment.
Public comments. I forgot trying to get here. Trying to make sure. I'm sorry. Is there any public comments? Anyone that would like to address us with anything that we've already discussed?
Yeah, hi, I'm Virgie. I live at 305 East Main in Homer. I would like some guidance at some point, whether the changes to this ordinance or the spending affects the EDC, because I know we do follow quite a few of your ordinances, so I'll probably just need some interpretation and whether that follows. So I don't need it now. I don't need it for a while, but just wanted to make sure that I got some guidance on that.
Thank you so much. Anyone else? Okay, so we will hold city manager's report for the next meeting. We do have 1 or 2 minutes, and I guess we can't hold, let's, the council members that any comments today, must have now, okay, so. All right. Motion to move, motion to adjourn.
So, support.
Let me do all in favor?
Aye.
Any nays? Meeting adjourned at 6:56.